Jason.
Hold on.
Dude. Hello.
Hold on. Yes. Chris, what's up?
Are you done with your drum solo?
I was vibing, baby. I was vibing. We're going to talk about drums today, man. I love it.
Damn.
Everybody, welcome to Outward Bound Conversations in Jazz. I'm Jason. That's Chris. We are vibing to this series we've been doing, man. We've done bass, we've done guitars, we've done sax, we've done piano. Now, tonight, we got the drummers. I am up for it. And yeah, we're just going to have a ton of fun today, man. Before we get started, and I do want to jump right in, but let me hand it off to Chris, because Chris has some really good stuff to break off for you guys here before we get started.
Yeah, we have a monster show tonight. I mean, going through my list, choosing a bunch of records to go over. It's going to be a deep discussion, but can't start the show without acknowledging the passing of Lou Donaldson. I believe he was 98 years old, famed saxophonist, prestigious career. So those in the jazz and music community, rest in peace, Lou. Also, happy Veterans Day. Veterans Day, definitely big in the jazz world. Guys like Coltrane, Brubeck, Wayne Shorter, so many famous jazz musicians definitely served this country. So I wonder if there's a book or a documentary on that. It would be an interesting topic, probably a deep topic to go in, just the influence of the military services on this great art form. And then lastly, many people are asking, it was a busy week for Jason and I was live 3 times last week. Jason, I think, might have been live 3 times in some other projects that he's doing, and Whatnot twice. So we will get the bass and guitar playlist finalized for tomorrow. It will be on Spotify. It will be on Tidal. If you have Apple Music, you should probably just buy Tidal. And if you have Qobuz, you're probably even too prestigious for this jazz chat. So,
and if you have Napster, I mean, more power to you.
We tried to get a 12-inch box set published with our playlist, but the licensing is just too expensive. And since not everyone is liking and subscribing to the Spins Vinyl channel and these streams, we're having a hard time creating revenue to get the goods for that type of stuff. So don't forget to like and subscribe, guys.
Yeah, thanks for saying that. Also, thanks for mentioning the playlist. I mean, those are cool. It's good to hear that people are asking, man, because I know I'm a little tardy. I'm sorry, but we're going to get those up, and they're really fun. So, what he's talking about is we do the show, and the artists that we talk about, we just pick a song from each of those records. They go into a playlist, and we dump it into I'm trying to put it in the first comment and the description of all of our past shows. So look for that coming soon to a YouTube near you. We got a lot of requests already, man. People want to see, I don't know, what do we got? We got Milford Graves is on here, says Breakfast King of Loyola. We got a little, who else did I see on here? Now I can't find it. Oh, Pete LaRocca says Cesar. Yeah.
Cesar.
I don't know, man. Stay tuned, guys. I don't know. We'll have either we'll have those guys or one's just as good. So don't go anywhere. This is going to be fun. Oh, Art Blakey, he says. Okay, well, topping off the show here, kicking us off is Cesar. Of course, as we are wont to do on these streams, we always got to talk about the GOAT first.
The GOAT. Greatest
of all time, ladies and gentlemen. Let's talk about him right now. I just happen to have a little record here by the name of Moanin. And of course, this record was known as the Jazz Messengers, but originally, but then the song, and you can see this one doesn't say Moanin anywhere on it, but then they started issuing it with the name Moanin. Somehow it just took on that moniker. And so this is kind of how we know this, right? Is as Moanin. So let's jump into Art Blakey, man. By the way, all these records, I spent like a couple of hours today listening to all these things, taking notes and stuff so that I'd be prepared. But, you guys know Blakey. Blakey, to me, I would call his style aggressive, not in a bad way. But he's very forward. He lets you know he's there. Obviously, puts together some great bands. Jazz Messengers was around for like 35 years until his death in 1990, and all fantastic musicians in there. This is one of his most popular records. I don't know if I'd say it's his best, but I think it's his most well-known, and it's very, very good. What's great about the title track Moanin', which was written, incidentally, by the piano player Bobby Timmons, it's just so smooth and cool. It's just such a great vibe. Timmons slays on that track. You know, it doesn't surprise me that he wrote it. He's very, very good on this album. And you get great fiery hard bopping solos from Lee Morgan and Benny Golson on here. It's a fantastic album. You know, I think I've heard this album so many times because this is one of those first albums when you start really getting serious about jazz, like many of you are. You have to hear this, right? And so when you start out with a short list, you find yourself listening to records kind of over and over. This was one of those for me, man, going back, 25 years when I was really started to kind of take jazz seriously. And at this point in time, I have probably played this record out. I need a little break from it, but I can still listen to the title track Moanin'. It's so freaking great. Look, Blakey he's extremely important to the chain of hard bop drummers, or just hard bop in general. In fact, there is an album by the Jazz Messengers called literally Hard Bop. And again, like I said, he led the Jazz Messengers for 35 years. He's just an essential musician to familiarize yourself with within the world of hard bopping jazz. Definitely go check out some Art Blakey. These have a lot of great pressings. If you guys know me or watch my channel at all, you'll know I have a ton of Japanese pressings. This is a Japanese press. This is on what's called the BNJ series. And this got a lot of great Japanese pressings, and they sound quiet and phenomenal. This one is no exception. This one is clean, and man, it just sounds great. So if you see this stuff and you can get it for a good price, like you don't have to pay the $20 to get it here, from Japan, I would snag it. They sound fantastic. So that's my Blakey pick, Moanin' right there. And Chris, what do you think, man? What do you got?
Well, I agree with you on Blakey. I mean, probably the most innovative hard bop drummer. The other great thing about Blakey is you talk about the talent tree, the people that pass through his band. I mean, just to name a few, you're talking Lee Morgan, Horace Silver, Wayne Shorter, Chick Corea, Donald Byrd, Jackie McLean. I mean, so many people were messengers at one point in time. So I think his influence there is understated. I mean, it's kind of like a rite of passage almost. Very few people didn't play with him that are among the greats. I have 3 Blakey records to show, and my goal tonight is to show records that I love, but also I think are accessible and easy to find for people who are curious. So the first one I'm going to start with got a Tone Poet reissue a couple of years ago. This is a great record. It's Art Blakey's The Witch Doctor. Well, this has Lee Morgan, Wayne Shorter on trumpet and sax, Bobby Timmons on piano, Jamie Merritt on bass, and of course Art Blakey on drums. This is just a cool, smooth record. All-star cast, obviously. I would say the title track on here is track 1, The Witch Doctor. That's really the song, spoiler, that's going to go on the playlist that I think everybody should check out. The one cool thing I learned about this album, and this goes back because obviously I wasn't alive at the time it came out, but this was recorded in 1961, but then shelved for release until 66 or 67. When I hear this record, I think, why would you shelve this? Like, why wouldn't this come out? I'd be interested to know the history on it. Maybe somebody in the gallery can comment on that. But that's my first pick for Blakey, The Witch Doctor. And it sounds like a witch doctor's playing on this album with Blakey's aggressiveness and his madness on the drums. So very cool record.
That's awesome. Yeah, it is interesting how many records, even from Blue Note, got shelved. I mean, we had one recently come out from Bobby Hutcherson that had been shelved for 3 or 4 decades. It happens. Like, these things pop up from time to time, and it's a real treat when they do. But then it leaves you asking, why? In fact, oftentimes these records that were issued back in the day, still there was a whatever incubation period of like 2, 3, 4 years sometimes before they would actually come out after being recorded.
Yeah, it's wild to me. It just goes to show how prolific these guys were, right? And they
Yeah.
were all constantly playing, all on each other's sessions, all of them leaders at one point, all of them fantastic sidemen. Just, when we did our fantasy draft, it was hard not to reassemble some of the configurations that already existed because these guys were so prolific.
Yeah.
Second one I'm going to bring up, I feel like I didn't know about this record, and a lot of people don't really bring it up. And it's an album called Drum Suite by Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers, and this was released in 1957 on Columbia. I believe this is the Impex reissue. For those that don't know, Impex are an audiophile label, really do a great job. I picked this because this really is a heavy percussion album. Obviously, Blakey's on it. There's congos on here. The first 2 or 3 songs are like these African rhythmic pieces that are just really intense but not overpowering. And then he has just some great musicians on this record as well. Bird's on here, Kenny Drew, Joe Jones plays some percussion as well. So this is a really cool record that I just don't hear a lot of people bring up. You can snag a copy of the Impex reissue. I don't know if there's been other reissues of this. I haven't really done a lot of homework on it, but this is a really fun step into Blakey's environment. If you're not into jazz or you like world music, especially and like jazz, this is a really good fusion of those two. This is a really cool record and a really cool cover as well. And then the last one, I selfishly am bringing this up, and I don't know how easy it is to get this. I don't know if there's been reissues. It's not expensive. I picked this up rather inexpensively in really good condition. But this is Art Blakey, the Art Blakey Quartet, a jazz message. This has McCoy Tyner on keys, Art Davis, and we don't talk about Sonny Stitt enough, but he is on this record, and this has a really cool bluesed out up-tempo version of Summertime on it, which is just, obviously a standard that a lot of people have covered, but this is a really cool record that you should be able to find decent copies of inexpensively. But this is a really accessible record. This came out in, checking my notes here because I don't remember. 1964. So this is an Impulse release as well. But those are my Blakey picks for the week.
Hell yeah, those are awesome. It's funny. Summertime is definitely one of those tunes that lends itself to being covered. It seems like everyone has done it. And for the most part, it always sounds good.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely.
So I failed to mention, so the Moanin, that was issued in 1958. So yeah, there you go. There's the GOAT. We got him out. I mean, we could talk about him for hours, obviously, but this show, we want to introduce you to some guys maybe you haven't heard yet, and we will get there. But next on the list is going to be Elvin Jones. Elvin Jones, man, what a fiery player he is. And I got him right here on Wayne Shorter's Juju. And this is 70 Blue Note 75th anniversary UK pressing. For the hardcore people that are watching this, either in right now or at some future date, the 75th anniversary gets really panned. The UKs are supposed to be from the tapes and not digital, and I have a couple of them, and they sound really great. So at least the copies I have. So anyway, Wayne Shorter, Juju with Elvin Jones. So Elvin, obviously known for his polyrhythmic style, and this record is no exception. He's well known for being an integral part of John Coltrane's quartet. And for more on that, stay tuned. Track 1 of Juju, the title track, tells you everything that you really need to know about Elvin, how he's going to perform on this record. It's phenomenal. He just shows up. He's such a hard worker, and he always shows up. And his stuff is amazing. It's very unusual, and it's because he's so capable of playing different rhythms with every part of his body and stuff. And so he has a very unique individual sound. That's why people love playing with him. The first thing that will impress you about this record is just how phenomenal the personnel is. We get Wayne Shorter on tenor, of course. We get Elvin. Wait a minute. I have to double check now. Sorry. Right, Elvin, we got McCoy Tyner on piano, Wayne Shorter, obviously. So we got McCoy and Elvin on here as well. And everyone comes correct on here. It is so good. You get these guys together and they just sound phenomenal on this one. And it's a very different sounding record. Oftentimes, I know maybe for a lot of people that haven't quite got there yet with jazz or with hard bop, is that it can sound sometimes derivative. And there are some records that do, and I don't usually go in for that stuff. I like the stuff that's a little more different and unique and has some different sounds on it. And a lot of times that depends on the personnel you put together. And on this one, they did it right. It's just phenomenal on here. Elvin, you got him pulling out all the stops. I mean, like I said, there's a long section opening Juju, the title track. Wayne Shorter doesn't come in for a long time on it. And so you really just get to hear the rhythm section with McCoy. And it's awesome. It's awesome. It could just be its own tune. It's fun just to listen to that part of it. But of course, when Shorter does come in, it elevates it. It's awesome. Elvin, another guy that is just essential to the history of hard bop and avant garde jazz. And he just had an extremely long, prolific career. I mean, this guy played from 1948, which I didn't realize until very recently. I started seeing his name on some older stuff, and I was like, wow, I didn't realize that he had gone back so far, all the way up to 2004. So I would say anything with Elvin on it is worth checking out, at the very least. It's probably going to be a real treat. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much what I got on this one. Like I said, this is 75th anniversary. I don't know if this is currently in, maybe Chris could tell us. I don't know if this is currently out, but you can get these, the 75th anniversary ones, usually on Discogs or somewhere. They're fairly affordable, but anyway, great album. If it hasn't been reissued, it needs to be. It's phenomenal.
Almost positive. There is a classic series reissue of that.
Okay.
Yeah, and they're very affordable. And if you check on some of the bigger retailers, oftentimes that stuff goes on sale quite often. So definitely essential record. Is that your pick for Elvin?
That's my Elvin, yes.
Okay, so Elvin for me, this is very similar to the Ron Carter Mingus discussion we had. I could have put Elvin at number one. But it's hard to ignore Blakey's impact and tenure. But for me, what draws me to Elvin Jones outside of his work with Coltrane is when I hear a lot of drummers, rock drummers in the 60s and 70s into the 80s talk about Elvin's influence. Ginger Baker was high on Elvin, which makes sense if you think about his style. Who's the drummer from the Doors? It'll come to me. He speaks highly of Elvin. So many have. Really kind of highly innovative in that post-bop era. And he's just a rhythm maker. You talked about, I'm not a musician. You talked about some of the techniques he uses. Oh, John Desmore. Thanks, Danny C.
Yeah.
Danny C. Thanks for showing up, bud. By the way, Danny is a sick drummer. I've yet to see him live, but I watch his clips and is constantly on social media. He's a great music fan and a great player. Thanks for the bailout, Danny. So, yeah, for me, Elvin is just a powerhouse. And the one way I kind of describe Elvin's playing is that he's always busy, but he's never playing too many notes, which is really difficult to pull off. The two albums I'm going to talk about, one I talk about all the time, and I'm going to keep on pushing on our viewers because I just think it's such an accessible record, and it touches on standards and some avant-garde approaches to music. And I'm going to go back to Coltrane's Africa Brass again. This is the first volume that came out. This is a reissue. You can get this in a lot of different formats now. They also have Africa Brass Volume 2, which I think also got reissued, which is kind of the outtakes of these sessions. The track I'll point to on here is Blues Minor, where Elvin is driving a rhythm and really not only accompanying Coltrane, but also an orchestra in the background as well, which I think is interesting that he still stands out in that environment and really drives the track. So obviously we talk about Coltrane 60 to 66, Elvin, or 65. Elvin was a huge part of that. But I just love this record, and just, again, accessible stuff for people who maybe discovering the genre, this is essential to pick up and kind of venture into some more of the, I don't want to say it's avant garde, but it gets spiritual and definitely has some long songs. I mean, the opening track, Africa, is like 16 or 17 minutes long. So, but it's definitely worth going through. Now, I also picked a Wayne Shorter record. And I picked Speak No Evil, which also came out as a Blue Note classic reissue. And this has also got a star-studded cast. So you have Freddie Hubbard on trumpet, Wayne Shorter on tenor sax, Herbie on piano, Ron Carter on bass, Elvin Jones on drums. The track that I would recommend on this one is Fee Fi Fo Fum. And maybe Danny can help me out with some of my descriptions here, being the great drummer he is, but just the way that Elvin keeps time and has these attacks and snaps on the changes just really rocks. He kind of plays in between, just a really strong star-studded cast on this album. This came out in 1966, so Africa Brass was 61. This was 66. This is on Blue Note, obviously. Really great record, and can't go wrong with Wayne Shorter. I mean, we could do a whole show on Wayne himself, but this is a really cool Elvin Jones appearance in my book.
We might have to, just to get Chris to stick around. We're gonna have to. I'll have to throw him a bone, and we'll do the shorter. We'll do the shorter video. That's it.
That's it. Sorry, yeah, those are just those two.
Right. Good stuff. Good stuff. All right, Elvin Jones, man, just another guy. He's gotten some love on Tone Poet recently. He got this, I think early this year, he got Polycurrents, which is a phenomenal record. Could have easily showed that one too. So that's another one that's really accessible that you can pick up.
I think was he live at Pookie's too? They did like it was a Tone Poet, but it was like an archival, never before issued live show. I'm pretty sure that was his.
Oh, really? I must have missed that.
Yeah.
Very cool. To check that out. All right, so 2 down. The next guy I got here is, again, to me, to use Chris's phrase, the part of the Holy Trilogy, I think, which is Anthony Williams. And of course, if I'm going to talk about Anthony Williams, you know I'm going to talk about him on Out to Lunch right there with everybody: Eric Dolphy, Bobby Hutcherson, Freddie Hubbard, Richard Davis. Just an outstanding, like this, for me, this is my favorite jazz album. It's the lineup whereby I judge all other lineups. It's always about, well, how many guys do you have off Out to Lunch? Kind of a deal. It's hard for me not to look at, other albums that way. But he's the perfect drummer for the perfect record on here. I mean, even though this, as far as I know, the only time they played together, if I'm not mistaken, I hope I'm not wrong. That might be another record. I think so, though. As I go through my notes, I'll be able to tell you for sure. This album has some really wild and strange time signatures. And so Tony Williams is really up for it on it. It's got some unorthodox playing. Like I always say of this, it's so well recorded for being so unorthodox. It's hard to get a bad pressing of this. This is a second... I'm still on the hunt for an OG, but this is the second version, which came out in 1966. The OG was in 1964. Just a phenomenal record. And Tony Williams, again, just outstanding on this. Williams was a member of Miles Davis's second great quintet, which I brain farted on our fantasy draft. But he's also a huge part of Herbie Hancock's sessions. Going all the way back to early Herbie stuff. My Point of View, Empyrean Isles, Maiden Voyage. He's on all those and a ton more. And like I said, I mean, Williams is an essential part of this record right here. Really bobbing and weaving between Bobby Hutcherson and Eric Dolphy on here, which to me are kind of the big standouts. But he just holds it down, and it holds down the rhythm section on this record. He has to play so many different styles on this record. There's lots of different tempos on here. For you that know this record, you know it's unusual, very avant-garde. There's a lot of different things going on, and Tony's just always up for it. Whatever's going on. If it's Eric playing flute, if it's Eric playing bass clarinet, or whatever, he's just up for it. So it's fantastic. Give him a ton of credit on this one. He's got to play things from, like, at some points it's kind of like a marching band style, to groovy, fiery, bluesy, everything in between. He does not falter. It's just fantastic. And that's pretty much his story across his discography. I point this one out just because it's my favorite record, but I mean, Anthony Williams is always going to be top notch. He's just another one like Elvin, where you can just see his name and be like, okay, I'm going to take a chance on that.
Yeah.
Essential to Miles, essential to Herbie, essential to Out to Lunch. Do not sleep on Anthony Williams. He's phenomenal. And so, yeah, that's my guy that I'm going to pick is Anthony Williams on Out to Lunch.
Yeah, so I have 3 Anthony Williams records to highlight, or appearances to highlight. The first 2 I want to talk about are really important. You bring up Miles. These are records when Miles had his second great quintet, and these are the bookends of that era. So I'm going to talk about 7 Steps to Heaven first, and then I'm going to talk about Miles in the Sky, which is one of my favorite Miles records. So first, on 7 Steps to Heaven, you know, you got to recognize something about Williams on this album. He's 17 years old. 17 years old in 1963 when they put this out. This is a really big transition period for Miles. You know, the second great quintet really was experimental and really broke some barriers down. This is the last Miles album with standards until like the 80s, or covers until the 80s. This is like the last time he's doing some stuff that's been done before by other artists. And I believe this is, if I'm not mistaken, this is the first time that Williams and Herbie play together as well. I could be wrong about that, but I'm pretty confident about it. Standout track for me on here, as far as Tony's goes, is So Near, So Far. I think he really stands out on that record. Also on this, and this is a star-studded lineup as well. I mentioned Herbie. You have George Coleman on tenor, Anthony Williams on drums, and Ron Carter on bass. So 7 Steps to Heaven. This kicked off the second great quintet, and it was then bookended with the last album, which this is one of my favorite Miles records, hands down. Miles in the Sky. This features Herbie, Wayne Shorter, Ron Carter, Tony, obviously, and then George Benson. Young George Benson makes an appearance here, which is a standout track for me. That's going to be Paraphernalia that Benson plays on. So, you know, this is the end of the quintet. There were some big changes as Miles went into more of the electric period. This is a fantastic record. It only has, I think, 4 songs on it. If you get the 45 RPM from MoFi, it's 1 song on each side. This is just essential Miles for me. But to see Tony Williams kind of start off as he's still a kid on this record. He's 23, I think, when he makes this, or he appears on this. But to see him start off that great era at 17 and then bookended in just a completely different style just goes to show his versatility. And it also obviously speaks highly of all the creative geniuses that were playing with Miles at the time. Now, my third pick is really for you, Jason. Going to pick here a Blue Note release. This is Andrew Hill's Point of Departure. Yeah. And when for those that don't know, Jason has done some pretty extensive videos on Dolphy. He loves Dolphy. I love Dolphy. I didn't love Dolphy as much until I started hearing Jason talk, and we've talked a lot about Dolphy offline. This is a great record. Features Kenny Dorham on trumpet, Dolphy on alto sax, flute, and bass clarinet. My man Joe Henderson on tenor sax, Andrew Hill on piano, Richard Davis on bass, and Anthony Williams on drums. So you basically get the overlapping worlds of Chris and Jason on this record between Joe Henderson and Dolphy, and then Richard Davis and Kenny Dorham. The standout track here for me is Flight 19. Williams just creates a pulse on this track and guides these guys through a magnificent journey. Highly recommend you guys check out this whole album, but especially Flight 19. It's just a great cut. This came out in 1964, so smack in the middle of the Miles run. And I believe Miles in the Sky was 1968, if I misspoke earlier. Sorry about that. But right in the smack of the Miles run, he goes off and does this with Blue Note, and it's just a killer lineup. It's a really nice, I don't want to say compliment to Out to Lunch, but you can definitely get from Out to Lunch to this in just a couple of steps on the chessboard. So definitely check out this album.
Whew, man. Pulling out the fire, dude, with Point of Departure. What a lineup on that one, man.
Killer.
You're only 2 steps. You just need a Freddie Hubbard and Bobby Hutcherson, man, and there you go. Yeah,
Right.
that's awesome, dude. All right. I assume that's your.
That's my those are my 3 for. I went a little overkill this week. There were so many I wanted to talk about.
I love it. I tried to make my life easy, so I'm glad you're picking up the slack. All right, next guy on the list, and I picked a different record, Chris, because I just totally was faded in the fact that he performs on here. I mean, how can we not talk about this record today? Any opportunity to talk about it? I know it's one of yours, if not your favorite record, jazz album. We're talking about Jimmy Cobb, and of course, Jimmy Cobb, or James Cobb, as he's known here, on Kinda Blue, Miles Davis Kinda Blue. And this is a fairly recent. This thing is in print always, right? You can always grab a copy of this. I forget what pressing this is, but it's come out like in the last 10 years or so. It sounds fantastic. But Cobb actually said of Kind of Blue that it must have been made in heaven, and of course we all know it was. This album was made in heaven, man. It's just too good. One of the greatest jazz albums in history. I would call it a perfect album. Like, even if you're stepping outside of jazz and you just said, all right, I got to put together 10 perfect records. I mean, you have to put this on there. It's just, there's not a dud on this. You just put it on, you just put the needle on and let it go and flip it over once. And that's it. Go to sleep, have a cocktail, smoke a cigar, whatever you got to do. It's like, it's just such a perfect record. Cobb's playing on this is so damn good. I mean, obviously everyone is so good. It's an understatement to even say that, but I just want to point out the longest track on the album, which is All Blues, as a particular highlight. It's bluesy, of course. Cobb's playing is just shining on here. It's swinging. That's the thing I would say about him. If you only gave me one word to describe Cobb with, he swings, and he can do it very subtly. He doesn't have to play a lot to get it done. And this record just swings. It's slow swings sometimes. Sometimes he picks up the tempo and it still swings. He's just phenomenal. Obviously, he's just in the pocket, and he just gives a fantastic foundation for the other guys on here. You're talking about Coltrane and Miles, Cannonball, Bill Evans, Paul Chambers, and he just stands up with all of them. He just slays on this. He played on many of those guys' records as well. He played a ton on the other guys. Like, I'm pretty sure he played a lot with Cannonball, Coltrane, maybe not so much Bill Evans, but obviously Miles and stuff. So, this is a great album, but there's many others in the same kind of corner where he plays with these guys and just holds it down. He lived until 2020. This is a guy that, you might recognize him from YouTube. I've seen him on there. He's showing techniques. He's talking about his history in jazz and stuff like that. So that's really fun. You can catch him on YouTube and just talking about the history, his experience in jazz. So that's really cool. But yeah, that's about all I got to say about that, man. I got to leave something for Chris, but I mean, there he is on Kinda Blue. You guys already know probably. I mean, it's just phenomenal. If you've already heard this 100 times, go back and just listen to Cobb specifically. And it's a real treat. So there we go, Chris. Kinda Blue.
Yeah, Jason, I just want to one fact check. You made one mistake you made. I don't mean to call you out, but it's the greatest album of all time.
The greatest. Got it. Thanks for keeping me honest.
My man. So for Cobb, I took a different route. I wanted to focus on Cobb with guitar players because I think he does something special in some of the configurations I've listened to him. And I'm going to pick two records that you can get reissues of. One actually just came out recently. So the first one I'm going to highlight is Coltrane and Kenny Burrell. This was on New Jazz originally. This is the OJC. I have my Obi in the back here. Kenny on guitar, Coltrane on sax, Tommy Flanagan on piano, Paul Chambers on bass, and Jimmy Cobb on drums. I like hearing Cobb with guitar players because, again, he's another one of these guys who is really always in the pocket. Like you said, he swings. You have two lyrical players like Burrell and Coltrane kind of trading off throughout this album. Obviously, Paul Chambers and Tommy Flanagan create a great rhythm section with Cobb. The track on here, I don't remember the full name of it. Oh yeah, track 2. I never knew. So if I'm going to recommend something that highlights Cobb on this record, it's going to be that one. This is, again, really accessible, easy to get. I'm sure some people out there have OGs and first and second pressings, but you can go get an OJC of this, very affordable. And this would be in a jazz starter pack for me. 10 or 15 albums I think everybody should have. This is definitely one of them. The second one I love Cobb on is, and by the way, that Burrell and Coltrane was 63, I think. 63. The next one is the Wynton Kelly Trio, Smoking at the Half Note.
Ooh, man.
This is an acoustic sounds reissue. This you'll find in bins. It might be beat up a little bit. You can definitely get reissues of this record. Same thing here. This is obviously live. Love hearing live music. Just a different element, a different character that takes place. The big cut on here for me that Cobb really shines on is 4 on 6. But this is one of the best titled albums ever. It literally is smoking at the half note. These guys just tear it up. So when I think about Jimmy Cobb, I think about his work with guitar players. That's why I chose these two for this week.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. He just makes me think too as you're talking. He's kind of like the perfect traditional drummer. Like he just has all of the essentials down, man. And he just, he's great. He's not like flashy like an Elvin or something like that, but man, he just holds it down so well. So yeah, good picks. Smoking at the Half Note, man. What a record.
Yeah, it's a fun one.
All right, next up, another drummer as we go through our drummer show today. I just have a habit of finding these guys on records who with artists that I really, really love, and because a good reason to talk about this stuff. We got to get into Joe Chambers now. Joe Chambers on my pick on Bobby Hutcherson's Components. And this is fantastic, man. This is my favorite Bobby Hutcherson album. I think, it's so good. Joe played a little bit with everyone, and he played a lot with Bobby. He's on a ton of Bobby records. He's on Dialogue, Happenings, Oblique, and on and on and on. But again, this is my favorite, so I had to pick this one. Why is Components my favorite? I mean, outside of the fact that it's got side A is just amazing Bobby Hutcherson compositions, which is one of the reasons I really love Bobby Hutcherson. But it also has a star-studded cast. We get Freddie Hubbard on trumpet. So Hutcherson and Hubbard both appear on Out to Lunch, obviously. Then we get Herbie and Ron Carter. And I know you've mentioned that pair a couple times already, but man, they're just awesome together. So here we got like just an amazing cast of characters. Just a phenomenal lineup here. And they come through in spades. Everyone is just shining. Everyone is bringing their own personality to this record. And it really shows, man. Joe Chambers holding it down so well, obviously. He is fire all over this album. He's kind of a perfect complement. And I think part of the reason he played so much with Bobby is that he helps he fits like a glove with Bobby's vibes. And I know you kind of mentioned the pairing too, how important it is for drummers to kind of really get in sync with certain instruments in a band like this. And he does so freaking well with the vibes on here. And with Ron Carter and Herbie, kind of rounding out the, the session there, man. They just sound so good. Start with the title track on this one, I think. It's phenomenal. Everything that you need to know about this is going to be in that first track, but of course, stay for all the compositions. As I said, side A is going to be all Hutcherson compositions, and side B is going to be all Chambers compositions, which is really cool. So not only do we get Chambers on drums here, you get to hear compositions on all of side B, and they sound fantastic. Tranquility is another one. I think that's track 2 on side A. It's classic Bobby Hutcherson, man. It's beautiful. And of course, Chambers holds it down on that one as well. So yeah, this is the Connoisseur LP series. sometimes you got to pay for these. I don't know. Maybe this one has been reissued recently. I think this might be one of the Bobby Hutcherson records that a lot of people are champing at the bit to get a good reissue for. But yeah, I mean, if you could find it, especially this connoisseur series, it's well worth it. So yeah, that's my pick right there for Joe Chambers. We got Components, Bobby Hutcherson.
Yeah, so you're going to be we're in lockstep. Just so you guys know, Jason and I don't really talk about what we're going to choose and why we choose it. We just make sure that we don't pick the obvious ones. Like we're both not going to do Kinda Blue. We're both not going to do Moanin. But once again, we're in lockstep. So the first, I'm going to do 2 Joe Chambers records. The first one's going to be Freddie Hubbard's Breaking Point.
Oh, nice.
This was an eye opener for me in a lot of ways because there's a lot of musicians on here that I just was never really heavily familiar with. Ronnie Matthews on piano, James Spaulding on alto sax, Eddie Kahn on bass, Chambers on drums, and obviously Freddie Hubbard on trumpet. This came out in 1964, and the standout track for me on this is first track on side B, Blue Frenzy, which is a Hubbard composition, and just a great listen overall. And Chambers really shines on that track specifically. This is a really cool record, but I'm going to put this one down because I want to get into the next one. It's a guy I'm very passionate about. It features a piano and bass player that we seem to keep on talking about, like Batman and Robin. And that's going to be Wayne Shorter's Schizophrenia. This was in the Blue Note box set from Vinyl Me Please as a reissue. And then they thankfully did this as a repress on the Tone Poet series. This is a sick, sick, sick album. This is, to me, kind of sort of letting go of bop, but not necessarily fully releasing it, and then kind of going into a free jazz period. So this was 1967. This is right on the cusp of Miles going electric, Wayne being a huge part of that, Wayne definitely stepping out as a great composer and one of the greatest players ever. The track for me is the opening track, Tom Thumb. And what's cool about that track, in my opinion, is Chambers goes in kind of this bossa nova intro, just really like jiving on the kit quite a bit. And then there's just a sharp transition into Shorter just going out of his mind, and he just falls right in line and gives these guys just a nice bass line to kind of perform on. So I failed to mention, which some of you may have picked up on, though, Ron Carter on bass, Herbie on piano, Wayne on tenor sax, James Spaulding again on alto sax and flute, Curtis Fuller on trombone, and Chambers on drums. Schizophrenia, Wayne Shorter. It's my guy. One of the best jazz composers and composers ever. So this is a good pickup for everybody if you're interested. We lost your audio, Jay.
I guess it helped if I take mute off. Yeah, it's amazing just how much we talk about Ron Carter and Herbie, man. It's like they're just like you said, the dynamic duo, man. It's like they're just so freaking good together. As the Table Turns wants to know, any Elvin yet? Yes, if you scrub back to the beginning of the video, you will see that our second guy was Elvin Jones. So yeah, or watch it at a later date. Either way, yes, we definitely got into Elvin. All right, awesome, man. So next guy I'm going to talk about, another well-known drummer, and this guy got a Miles record for him, and it's going to be Philly Joe Jones, and he's right here on Workin' from 1960. This is another one like we were talking about earlier. This was recorded in 56, but didn't get dropped until 1960. This is the famous Miles Quintet, right? That produced 4 albums from 2 sessions. We got Relaxin', Steamin', Cookin'. This one right here, Workin'. That should basically tell you everything you need to know about what's about to happen on here, but then that would leave a short review. So let me get into a little bit of it. All the aforementioned records feature Coltrane, Red Garland on piano, Paul Chambers on bass, and these are just fantastic. I mean, the Relaxin', Steamin', Cookin', and Workin' are just a fantastic little four pack, amazing records. these are just the other thing too about these two, I should say, is that they're very spontaneous. I mean, these are records that Miles kind of put together, as far if I remember correctly, to fulfill a contract obligation, and just kind of went in there and said, like, we're just gonna like wing it for a couple sessions, and it resulted in these 4 records. And these are some of the best output that he has, you know, for this era. um let's see. Jones, okay, so the thing about Jones playing too, swinging and bluesy, it's all over this record. It's easy to see why he was so important, such an important component to Miles and his quintet. He's such an amazing compliment to Red Garland's piano. Like we've been saying kind of throughout this, is that sometimes you pair people up and they just complement each other so well. And with Red Garland here, they're just in lockstep. It's just so good. Every tune on here is great. You can drop the needle anywhere. Again, you're not going to, in the same way as I mentioned on Kinda Blue, I think some of this Miles stuff that came out in that same era, it's just, they're all compliments to Kinda Blue. I mean, I know Kinda Blue gets all the love, obviously, but some of these records, once you listen to them a few times, are just as good. I know Chris would disagree with that probably, at least a little bit. But you're not going to be disappointed, man. You're not going to be disappointed. If you like Kinda Blue, you got to check this out. This is the most recent OJC, Original Jazz Classics pressing. This a lot of the OJCs that are coming out now over the last year or two, whenever they start reissuing them, are going to be reissues from the ones that came out, you know, back in the 80s and stuff. And they just sound really good. So yeah, easy to track down. Sounds fantastic. Again, if you're a Kinda Blue guy, you could do a lot worse with this one right here. So that's my pick. Chris, for Philly Joe Jones, Workin', 1960.
Yeah, I got to take a minute to highlight what's going on with OJC, Tone Poet, Classic, the acoustic sounds reissues. Look, I would love to have first pressings, second pressings, and minty condition. It's a little unrealistic for my budget. So I think what everybody's doing as far as the labels is reissuing this stuff is really important, because we're probably not having these conversations if it wasn't for that, right? You're gonna be exposed to jazz, but you're not gonna have the ability to grab it, put it on your shelf, and you know, you're gonna be streaming it and stuff, which is fine. But I think people really need to be happy that those reissues are coming back and they're affordable, because it's really keeping the genre alive. And to your point, a lot of those OGCs came out 35, 40 years ago, and the fact that they're putting them back in print just speaks to how important some of these records are. So just want to highlight that for people.
Yeah, so good. And the thing too is that they also sound great. I mean, even the classic series, Blue Notes Classic series, I think all the ones I've picked up, they sound really good. So for $30, and oftentimes those will be on sale on like Amazon, you know, you can pick those up for like $20 sometimes, and they sound great. And so you're right, that's in some ways that's kind of the most accessible way for a lot of us to pick up some of that stuff, and to have it be affordable and sound great. It's a win-win for sure.
Yeah, so when it comes down to my Philly Joe records, my theme for this guy is I picked 2 albums that are 2 of the coolest album covers ever. And to me, going to jazz starter pack. So I don't have much critically to say about
your starter pack. Is getting bigger and bigger, dude.
Yeah, true.
It's going to be a starter trunk pretty soon.
Well, there's a lot to get into. Here's my review for both these records. They kick ass, they're essential, they're accessible, and they're classic. It's going to be the same review for both. The first
all right, well, I'm going to get into my next guy now.
the first one is Sonny Clark's Cool Struttin'. And
nice.
You know, this is an album, Art Farmer on trumpet, our guy Jackie McLean on alto sax, Sonny Clark on piano, Paul Chambers on bass, Philly Joe on drums. 4 tracks stretched out. The opening track is the one for me, Cool Struttin'. Just kicks off the record with a vengeance, and just again, one of the coolest album covers ever. This is the Blue Note Classic reissue, which you can find in abundance at every record store you're in, at least on the East Coast. Came out in 1958, so right around the time, you know, before Kinda Blue was there you go, Cesar. Before Kinda Blue, a couple of years before Kinda Blue was recorded. A lot of great records in 1661. This was kind of on the precipice of that era. So I love Cool Struttin'. The next one was 1963. Another one of the coolest album covers ever. And this lineup is ridiculous. Hank Mobley, No Room for Squares.
Man, I love that album.
Not to be confused with John Mayer's Room for Squares. Lee Morgan on trumpet, Hank Mobley on tenor sax, Andrew Hill on piano. Andrew Hill playing in a pocket a little bit on this record, but tastefully and classy. John Orr on bass and Philly Joe Jones on drums. I don't have a standout track on this because I love it all. This is just a phenomenal record. This finally got reissued in the classic series. The Music Matters was sought after for a long time. Maybe Acoustic Sounds did this in their Blue Note reissue series. I don't recall. But this is just killer record. Again, 1963. Everybody should have this and Cool Struttin', if not for the artwork alone.
Well, that is a perfect record to pull, man. Like that is drum featuring Philly Joe Jones on drums deluxe. It's so good. And the drums are a very, very integral part of that album, man. I just love that album.
Yeah, he definitely drives a lot there. And it's a not a big band, it's a bigger band. 2, 4, 5. But there's a lot of energy here. You have Mobley and Lee going back and forth on a lot of this record. And Hill with his fills. You're right though, Philly Joe Jones really is a star. I guess I could have said a little bit more about him on this, but this is just a great record.
No, you're good. I just say it because I just love that record, man. It's so good. All right. Philly Joe Jones in the books. All right. As we continue, I think we just got a few left here. We got, I'm going to go with another one as I go for just one record per artist. And as I go for, some very essential records. I love that Chris is doing all the heavy lifting tonight. Thank you, my friend. All right. Tonight we got, we got Billy Higgins, this time on Lee Morgan's Cornbread. And we got Jackie McLean and Hank Mobley are back here. and Herbie. We just keep talking about these guys, man. Billy Higgins, Hank Mobley, Jackie McLean, Herbie Hancock. I mean, it's the usual suspects, and they sound phenomenal on here. Billy Higgins in true form on here. A fantastic lineup, as I said. Larry Ridley on bass, who's someone that I'm not overly familiar with, but he comes correct on here, man. It's just a fantastic rhythm section. It's just a fun session. And part of that, I think, is because we get Smiling Billy on the drums. Smiling Billy Higgins. He's at the center of it all. And he's right up there as one of the most prolific drummers of all time in terms of recordings. He's credited with over 700 recordings. And you hear that, it could go a couple different ways. It could either be like, well, here's a guy that's, played way too much. How could everything be good? Or you might say, well, maybe there's good reason why he's in a lot of these sessions. Now, he was sort of the house drummer for Blue Note for a long time, but he appears in a lot of other labels as well, and a lot of other great sessions with great musicians, this being one of them, obviously on Blue Note, but a fantastic offering with his playing on here. He has a beautifully unique style. What's interesting is that he's not just, you would think maybe a guy that's played on 700 recordings is someone that's like very sort of traditional, and he's not. He has his own way of playing, and it's really, really good. He brings a lot of energy. Again, his energy always feels positive for some reason. He's high energy. Let's see. I want to say that you can just, if you look at any picture of him, you're going to see a smile on his face, and you can hear that. It comes through your speakers with Billy Higgins. There's a track on here called Our Man Higgins, and it's really worth the price of admission, man. It is so good. I don't have to tell you to listen to Billy Higgins because you already have. I mean, if you listen to any jazz, you must have heard him. As I said, he was recorded so much. But what I would say is, pay closer attention to Billy Higgins when you listen to him. You will not be disappointed. He's so good. In a way, he could have been the GOAT because he's just so good. So I'm glad we're talking about him today. This is another of the 75th anniversary. This again is a UK pressing. Again, I know that the US ones are hit or miss, big time on the quality control, and also digitally sourced. The UK ones, from what I've read, are analog source. So, and this is no exception. Sounds fantastic. Cornbread, just a classic album. You gotta have it. That's my Billy Higgins pick. Cornbread, Chris.
Yeah, it's a great pick. And if you go back, I think he played on basically the peak of everything Lee Morgan was a leader on. He did a ton of, and then he flips out and completely does something different with Ornette Coleman. He's on a bunch of Mobley stuff. Like, he is just everywhere. His footprints everywhere. It's a really great pick. My guy that I'm going to pick is Max Roach. And another guy that could have been in the conversation for GOAT at the top of the show. Gonna show 3 albums, really only talk about 2. One, it's hard for me not to acknowledge this, and you can get a bunch of reissues on this, but this is the Miles Davis, Birth of the Cool. Now, Max Roach is the session drummer on some of this. He shares responsibilities on a lot of these tracks, but this is essentially a compilation of stuff that Miles recorded, I think in like between 49 and 50 or 51, that was reissued in the late 50s. But it's hard not to talk about Max Roach with acknowledging how important he was being part of these sessions. This is a really important series of tracks and compilations in the history of jazz. But the 2 records I'm going to talk about where I think Max Roach is most important is really on the cultural consciousness that he portrayed in his music. And I think sometimes it's hard to understand that jazz being instrumental, you don't necessarily have the vocals, but he was obviously an outspoken activist throughout his whole life. And I think it comes across in the music. The first one I'm going to highlight, this is actually a Vinyl Me Please reissue, and I think it's got standard reissues too. But the first one I'm going to talk about is Sonny Rollins, The Freedom Suite. This is in 1958, and what I love about this album, Sonny's perspective, is he's really coming into his own at this point. He's really starting to push the boundaries of what he's capable of. It's a very expressive album. Track 1, the Freedom, side 1 is just 1 track of the Freedom Suite, and then side 2 is 4 tracks, a little bit more consolidated in their playing. The standout track for me on this is Will You Still Be Mine, which is I believe is a standard, and Max really shines on this record. I picked this because if you think about the spirit of where Sonny was going and what Sonny stood for, it makes sense that Max Roach was the drummer on this, just with his style and his approach to life and jazz in general. The next one I'm going to choose, it's a weird story about this record. So when I was a kid, I had a lot of people feed me music, especially jazz. And I had gotten a cassette tape from somebody that was just like Max Roach. That's all it said on it. And it was just Max Roach on one side. And I had heard it over and over again. I never knew the title. This is before the days where I could, go on the internet and like play a sound clip. And then just by chance last year, this album got reissued. And the album is called Members Don't Get Weary by Max Roach. And this is one of my favorite jazz albums ever. It was reissued by this label called Arc Records. I think they're out of the UK. They've reissued this. They've reissued a Yusef Lateef album, which is awesome. And they've also reissued a Roberta Flack album. I'm waiting for the next thing they're going to put out because it seems to be a pretty solid label. This came out in 1968. When you think about the times in America at that point, that's post Martin Luther King assassination, post Bobby Kennedy assassination, just in the short past, and then right in the time of Vietnam. And this is a record of protest. It's energetic. The track I'm going to recommend on here is the opening track again, like a lot of these records, Obstrusions, and this just kicks ass. It has this Afrocentric spirituality for the late 60s that resonates. You could tell it's a late 60s record. I don't know how else to describe it, but once you start playing the first track, you'll just kind of pick up on it. Side A, this is one of my favorite jazz albums ever, but side A is freaking immaculate. It goes into a song called Libra and then a song called Effie. I think Gary Bartz is on this record, Charles Tolliver, Stanley Cowell on piano. So a lot of those guys went off to start Strata East as well, I believe. So this is, I wouldn't say it's Avon Guard, but it has those elements, and you can see them kind of stretching where jazz had been up until that point, and then really tying in like this I don't want to say black power, but black pride and pain in the record. So you could find this from the ARC reissue. It looks like there's been some other reissues online. I don't have an OG. I've never heard an OG, but this sounds fine to me, especially compared to a blank, cassette tape dub I had when I was 15 years old. So, but yeah, definitely give this a shot. Danny, I'm looking at you too. Just listen to the first track to kind of get a sample of how this sounds. I feel like as a drummer, you'd love this. But
so did you know that was the cassette that you owned prior when you bought it, or did you not know until after you played it?
No. I picked it up when it came out last spring or whatever, and I dropped the needle. I said, "Holy shit! I've been looking for this," which is really cool. And like I said, it's not a Max Roach record that people say like, "Oh, this isn't." I don't think they say it's an essential Max Roach record, but I just think this is a really cool take. And this was on Atlantic too. So that's the other thing. This was on Atlantic late 60s. So now you're also coming into, if you bring in the pop world, you're talking about Aretha being there at that time. I feel like maybe was King Curtis there at that time. Anyway, Atlantic was massive, but there's a lot going on that label. So this is just a timely record. Definitely scoop it.
Very nice.
I was really excited to talk about this one. Sorry.
No, I love it, dude. And you got Danny hype. He's going to go buy it right now. So
nice.
Very cool.
Well, I think Danny's batting 1,000 on our recommendations from Outward Bound. I know he picked up that Joe Henderson Mirror Mirror record and loved it. So thanks for supporting the opinions, Danny.
Very nice. Woo. Wow. That was good, man. All right. So I'm fired up. This is one of my favorite jazz records right here. I'm always happy to talk about my guy. The drummer on here is Roy Haynes. That's what we're going to get into. The album is Chick Corea's Now He Sings, Now He Sobs. 1968 on the Solid State label. This got a Tone Poet release, fortunately, and it sounds fantastic. First of all, it's Chick Corea. I love Chick Corea, man. He's just his piano playing style is complex and beautiful and different and fusion, and it's phenomenal. And secondly, it's one of my favorite jazz albums of all time. It features a trio. And sounds much bigger, as oftentimes I think Chick's trios do, just sound more full and bigger in all the right ways. He's phenomenal, obviously. So is Miroslav Vitus. I'm not sure how to pronounce bass player on here, but that's who it is, and he's phenomenal on this record. And Roy Haynes, of course, on drums is phenomenal on here. Roy Haynes, as we're filming this, is 99 years old. He's still going, this guy, which is fantastic. He's played drums for over 80 freaking years. I mean, this guy played with Charlie Parker. He played with Bud Powell. He played on 3 really essential Eric Dolphy albums, 3 of his biggest albums. He played with Sonny Rollins, who we mentioned. He played with Sonny Stitt, who we mentioned. And still, I'm picking Chick Corea because I just love this album, and his playing on here is so good and so challenging, I think. And I just think you need to know about it. I mean, if this is one that you haven't heard, maybe you're not that into Chick Corea, I think this is a fantastic place to kind of wet your whistle. It's very, very good. Roy Haynes on this album is fire. I mean, if I haven't already said it, he hangs with Chick on this record, complements it so well. And when you're in a trio, it's kind of like, talking about, especially a piano trio, you talk about the drummer, there's really nowhere to hide, right? Oftentimes you can kind of either come through too much or hang back, too much, lay out too much, and he doesn't. He just fits right in on this. He's not overpowering, although he's very present. And his playing is just meticulous. and just kind of what this album needs with Chick Corea on it. There's a song on here called Steps What Was. It's a 14-minute track, which I love. I know Chris loves the extended tracks also. And it really kind of kicks off the journey of this record. It's as good a place to start as any with Roy Haynes, I think. I love his sort of cymbal play is maybe something that stands out for me, is kind of standing out a little more and making it kind of unique to him. I just think he's second to none on here. Along with Billy Higgins, as I mentioned before, as being so prolific, he's also one of the most recorded drummers in jazz history. So that's my pick. I had to put some shine on Roy Haynes, man, and give him his flowers. Now He Sings, Now He Sobs, 1968, Chick Corea. This is the Tone Poet. You can still get these, I think, or at least they're a little more accessible than OGs. Just phenomenal, Chris. So that's my guy right there.
Dude, it's crazy because first of all, I'm really glad we're closing with Roy Haynes. I think there's some symbolism in that because I think he's underappreciated. Looking at my notes, I comment on his cymbal playing as kind of being very direct, and I also called him meticulous.
Wow.
Which is kind of nutty. So
that's scary.
It is
great minds think alike.
So I think about I'm going to do 3 records. I'm going to do two together and then one to kind of really put a bow on how important this guy was. But when you talk about kind of that cymbal riding, being meticulous, playing another guy where we talked about Elvin being really active but not overpowering. I feel like Haynes, he's not a powerhouse like Elvin, but he has that same drive where he just kind of gets in where he fits in and keeps a groove going. So I want to highlight this is, again, thinking about you when I pull these two out. I want to highlight 2 Jackie McLean records that came out on Blue Note. The first one is Destination, which also has Bobby. Ooh, not showing a good job there. Bobby Hutcherson, Larry Ridley, and
you might have to do a scroll. Do a scroll for us. There we go.
Yeah, sorry.
There we go. Destination Out. Yeah, fantastic album.
Beat my mic. This is Roy Haynes again playing in a way where Jackie can really drive and do what he does best. I feel like this highlights his ability to kind of sit back. And it's so cliche to sit back in the pocket, but like that's really what Roy does on a lot of the records that I love him on. And this is one. The cut for me on here, and there's a couple, but I'm gonna go with Riff Rap, which is the closing track, which is actually a Gretchen Montour piece. But this is a really good record. And then you follow that up just a year later with Jackie McLean's It's Time, another really cool album cover. Lineup of Jackie: Herbie on piano, Cecil McBee on bass, Charles Tolliver on trumpet, Jackie on alto, and obviously Roy Haynes on drums. The track on here for me is Snuff, which is the second track on side 2. But these two kind of highlight what we're talking about Roy Haynes and what you were mentioning, just really his ability to, similar to Elvin, be really busy but not overplay. He's not overshadowing the track, but if you really tune in, if you listen to these records a couple of times, start to pick apart the musicians, and he is just spot on in the pocket, really like a nice driving force on a lot of those rhythms.
You can tell he listens really well, right? I just think when you listen to him with Chick and on other stuff, especially really fine musicians, leaders, is he just complements it well. You could just tell that there's a symbiotic relationship. Either they've worked it out in advance, which many times they probably have, but also you could just tell that they're listening to each other really well. In fact, I saw a video on Chick Corea where he talks about this. And he talks about really kind of as they work through a session and just kind of like, obviously, and Danny knows, right? I mean, it's a lot about listening, to your fellow instrumentalists, but you can tell he's so good at that, and where the things he chooses to do and where he chooses to do it integrate really well and just create, I don't know, a symbiotic relation. I've said it before where it just sounds like sometimes musicians are such in lockstep, like you can't extract them. It becomes almost one sound. And at least on this record that I showed, and I think probably on the Jackie McLean records you showed, that relationship is there. Like they're just, you can't take one away from the other. Somehow they're just locked in. And so that is something about Roy Haynes that I just think is worth noting.
Yeah, I agree. And like the last album I'm going to show to kind of really put a bow on Roy Haynes and put a bow on this discussion is, it's one thing to be a great musician. It's another thing to be a great musician amongst other great musicians and just come up with these classic albums. Like, you know, me showing those Jackie McLean albums, yeah, they're great records, but the one I think that really exemplifies his ability to kind of be part of the group but still stand out and be amongst greats and still put his own twist is his presence on Oliver Nelson's The Blues and the Abstract Truth.
Oh man.
This is just an essential record. This features Paul Chambers on bass. Dolphy, again, you're going to hear Dolphy come up a lot. I feel like even when we talk about 80s R&B, somehow Dolphy's going to make it into it.
If you're trying to figure out where to start with Dolphy still, and you've tried some other things, that this is a great place to go, to try.
Absolutely. And then you have Bill Evans and the great Freddie Hubbard on this track. I don't know what else to say about this. There's probably been books written about it, but you know, a standard comes out of this album. Where would jazz be without Stolen Moments? And yeah, it's just an essential record. This has been reissued. This is an acoustic sounds version, which you can nab all over the place. And I guess that starter pack is growing because this also makes into this top 10 or 15 jazz albums that people should really investigate and take a look at. So yeah. You know, again, ego aside, to be a part of a recording like this with all these great players and still have a signature on this record is pretty impressive, especially with his playing style. So that's my last pick for Roy Haynes.
Whew, man, that's a great play. I mean, we bookended this show pretty well, man. I love that you ended that way. That is a phenomenal record. That needs to be in any jazz lovers collection for sure. Wow, towel us off, man. We got through it. It's only... At least for me, well, I'm sure it's late where you are. That was what, an hour and 12, man. Not bad. Very efficient on our part.
Yeah, I can tell you one thing. The playlist for this episode is going to be insane when we get it together. Oh, my
gosh. All right. I promise to get it out as soon as I can.
Well, we got thanks as the table turns.
Yeah, thanks, everybody. Wyoming, Danny as well, man. Appreciate you guys.
So I just, you know, since we finished quicker than normal, I just want to see while we kind of wrap up here, if anybody has comments or questions they want to throw out in the gallery, we'd be more than happy to entertain it. But while we're doing that, in the spirit of our show, what are we going to do next week?
It's a great question. I mean, okay, so we've done piano, we've done drums now, bass, guitar, we've done sax. I think that leaves us at trumpet, right? We got to do trumpet, I think.
I think that's the way to go. That's going to be a wild one.
On the one hand, you can say trumpet's going to be easy because there's so many to choose from, right? There's no way we can miss. I mean, but on the other hand, it's like, who do you omit from the list? That's the hard part.
Yeah.
As Table Turn says, tuba. All right. Well, we are going to do a catch-all, I think, after that one, right? Didn't we say that? Because we got to get guys in like vibraphone players. I'm thinking you got to figure out a way to get Alice Coltrane in here. She didn't show up on piano, but we got to show her, you know, get her in maybe on harp or something. And so, yeah, we'll definitely do another show after that. And heck, man, that might be kind of wrapping up the series, don't you think?
Yeah, I think it could. I think, you know, we've talked about kind of doing the miscellaneous category. Then we talked about doing like jazz adjacent. Like what do we listen to that we feel like is heavily influenced by jazz, or, you know, has elements of jazz in it that isn't in the jazz genre? Maybe that's a whole nother show outside of the series. But yeah, I think trumpet, and then maybe a catch-all, and then we move on to something else.
Who knows? We have other loves, we have other passions. We might have to bring them to the channel. So yeah, that'll be fun, man. And then again, I think Danny, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Danny. No, sorry, Danny has a good suggestion. Love to see you guys do a fusion show.
Yeah, that's a great call, Danny. I mean, That's the thing, Chris. We were talking too about like, well, where do you go from here, and and where do you get? I mean, there is endless ideas. Ideas abound for this because I think, and Danny is spots that lights it, nails it right there. Is that you can get into all the different genres of jazz. You can just spotlight, one artist or a series of artists, or even like, like with Miles and stuff like that, and then the quintets and stuff is maybe we spotlight one band or something, or the messengers, just so many different ways to go with jazz. I think we're definitely going to mix in some other stuff too, just because we love, rock, and I'm kind of champing at the bit to get at some like 80s, R&B soul records that I've been picking up lately. That'll be kind of fun too. So yeah, we'll definitely, but yeah, more jazz to come for sure. We're not done after these next two. We will definitely there will be way more where that came from.
Well, make sure everybody gives Spins Vinyl a thumbs up. Tell your friends, tell your friends, tell your friends. Go back and watch the fantasy draft. If you guys didn't tune in for that last Wednesday, it was an incredible experience. And I'm not just saying that because I'm the champion. I'm saying it because I got the popular vote for sure on a couple of rounds, but that was a really cool experience.
You brought the heat though.
Yeah, I tried. But, we also brought the heat with you, Chris, from WCB Jazz and Philippe from Jazz Bums. Like, it was just a good roster.
Yep. I know. I'm
biased. Definitely worth going back.
I'm definitely biased, for good reason, though. I think definitely checking that would be fun. And also, like, that's not going to be the last time we do that. I mean, that's just a great idea that Chris came up with. And then we've collaborated on it just to kind of make it even better. And I think in the future, we really want to start getting people involved too, like you guys in the chat, and start figuring out ways that you guys can get involved with doing a draft, and you guys pick your own players and stuff like that, maybe competing against us. Who knows? You guys did get to vote for the winners last week, but it would be fun just to kind of get people involved, Chris, to like pick their own bands, man. That would be super fun.
Yeah, and this is the stuff we've spent our whole life doing. Like, who's the better guitar player? Who's the best drummer? What's the best album ever? And I think that was one really nice way, especially with jazz, to kind of bring it all together and be creative with it. So definitely more to do on that topic in the future, and definitely audience participation, as you mentioned, be hella fun. So,
yep, for sure.
Well, my man, I've partied hard after my triumph in the Jazz fantasy championship. It was a long week.
He's not going to let that go. We need a rematch now.
I'm going to hold on to it as long as I can. Dude, I'll see you next Monday for Trumpet, and I'm looking forward to it as always.
Yeah, as am I, man. That'll be fun. All right, guys. Well, thanks so much for hanging out tonight. Really appreciate you guys, and being verbal in the chat. It always makes it way more fun when you guys hang out and and kind of go back and forth with us a little bit. We love it. And as Chris said, we will see you next Monday for trumpet players. So set the clock for that one. And yeah, everyone have a good night, man. We will see you next week.